and Leslie, IBM Cloud Risk and Controls Leader, active voice in the global cybersecurity community and participant in international forums, where he promotes diversity in technology and discusses the ethical challenges of digital transformation. With extensive experience in the technology and cybersecurity industry, and is recognized for her ability to connect regulatory requirements and cyber risks with robust technical solutions. At IBM, she leads initiatives that help businesses and public institutions adopt the cloud with confidence, balancing agile innovation with critical security and compliance requirements. Combining systems thinking, regulatory insight, and deep technical expertise, and Leslie stands out as one of the leaders shaping the secure future of cloud computing.
Welcome to Barcelona. This is day 3, and I'm super excited. Another sunny day has graced us today, and I have another powerhouse sitting next to me. Honey, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here.
Me too. I always like starting with getting to know the person, especially when we're going on LinkedIn, you know. For people out there that admire or don't know, how did that person get there? Tell me a little bit about you, about your story.
Sure. So about, I guess it's like maybe 14 years ago at this stage, I was a stay-at-home parent with my 3 kids and living a very, suburban life. And then stuff happened. Life happens. And there were some really big personal changes. And I went back out looking for work. And what I realized, so I live in Paris, France. I'm originally from Ireland. And it was a harrowing experience going back out looking for work, utterly humiliating. It's sort of, you might get a job, but have no aspirations of a career.
Wow.
And I have just memories of leaving meetings and interviews with very, very harsh recruiters. And there came a point where I just had to make a decision, which is I'm either going to keep on letting people make me feel small, or I'm going to own my story and be proud of the choices that I made. And they're not going to hold me back. They're going to be, and they are, they're part of what I am. And I do think this, I genuinely do think this. The time I spend full-time parenting is a big reason why I'm good at the stuff I do now.
Okay.
And long story short, I found a job in a small software company selling regulatory reporting software after the financial crisis. And it was a wonderful job to cut my teeth on because they just let me go figure it out. And I built a network up in financial services. I learned all about banking. I learned about technology. And I think probably the thing that's really stood to me the whole way through was that I didn't mind being the beginner in the room, and I didn't mind asking questions. And what I have found is when you turn up genuinely curious and you're interested in what people are doing, they like to tell you.
I know.
I
tell people that all the time.
I learned so much hanging out with developers, and I didn't always understand what they were telling me. But I love that they were passionate about what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I always try and find the people who love what they're doing, because even when I don't always understand it, like yesterday, for example, here, I met somebody who is an absolute powerhouse in post-quantum cryptography.
All right.
Do I understand everything he told me? No. But he seems to like me. I like him. And he's educating me. And it's just the journey has been that. And I've kind of gone from software seller into more pure play regulation in financial services. Today I do cloud, but then it spans out into AI and quantum and cybersecurity and all of these things. And I think the core of what I do is around operational resilience, which is a mindset. And the reason it speaks to me is because I've kind of, not intentionally, but unknowingly built resilience into how I approach life.
Yeah.
Right?
I think resilience is probably some sort of middle name that we should put to the adjective notes. Definitely on the show. Because, first of all, a mom of 3. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right. So we just are going to do one of these on the show. And then this is not an easy industry to crack.
No.
This is not, let's get into here. So first of all, thanks for sharing a little bit of your story and being real about the ridiculous in it that you had to hear.
Yeah, totally.
For beginners.
Yeah.
And I think that test of resilience is a test of like, wait a minute, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
And I also don't have a choice. So not having a choice allows you to be super insanely creative. And in a time of crisis, it allowed you to navigate the other chaos that people are feeling and uncertainty. Fast forward to now.
Yeah.
Leading all these different changes and leaders that are not comfortable of saying really the truth half the time.
Yeah.
That are afraid, that are being asked things that they don't understand.
Yeah.
They don't have that kind of humility, one-on-one class that we just got taught over here, which has led you here. How do you lead through that with IBM, and how do you lead through that with facts and software? Because I know you're also very, here's how this is going to go.
So I've learned the hard way
Okay.
that I always need to adapt. So, if I have a really strong feeling about something, I need to have the humility that not everybody sees the world my way. And I try and hold all of my opinions lightly. So I will come with data where I can.
Yeah.
I will come with persuasion. But I try really hard to make that my opinions don't become beliefs and religions.
Cool.
So they're not part of my identity. And if somebody says, you're wrong. And sometimes people will say it to you nicely, and sometimes people just want to put you down, and you have to roll with it. My opinion, if it turns out to be wrong, it doesn't demean my value. I'm learning something. So if somebody proves to me, actually, do you know what? Your logic is totally off the wall there. What you're saying doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always feel comfortable, but I'm okay with it, because what I'm more concerned with is being the person who is part of the team who builds the best thing or gets to the right answer.
Yeah.
I'm not too concerned
about by intention. You're saying, I'm trying to get there.
And I don't have to be the person who holds the truth. I just want to be part of the group who gets to a better place.
And that has led you to incredible places.
It does, because there's people massively under-index on how far being likable will get you in life. They really do. And I mean being genuinely likable.
Exactly.
Being somebody that brings good energy into a room. Being somebody who will make people laugh. You don't have to be the clown, right? But it's the feeling you bring into your interactions, and there is an intention there. Which is, I'm not here to dominate anything. I'm not here to control anything. I'm here to hear what you have to say. I'll tell you about what I know. Maybe we can do something together. And people feel that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an equalizer. For a very long time, I've gone through every shade of imposter syndrome. Like, I really have.
And we need another episode on that.
Yeah.
We'll get to cybersecurity in 1 second.
But I think, the worst situation I was in terms of imposter syndrome was when I did my first boot camp to reskill in cybersecurity.
Okay.
And I was the only woman in the room. That happens a lot. And there was a guy sitting beside me, very expert from a public authority, and he kind of looked at me and went, "What are you even doing here?" And I just shrank. And my inner 5-year-old was going, "Oh my God, I shouldn't be here." I just wanted to run away. But I caught the eye of the trainer. And it was just like this exchange of a microsecond glance. It was like, rise above it. Let it go. Doesn't matter. And that stayed with me. And every single time I find myself in a room kind of going, should I be here? Hell yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes it's just that soul, right? Like that human that looks you in the eye for that split second and sees like,
because we're all human.
You.
We're all human. It doesn't matter what we're doing in life. Every single person here, we've got the same biology.
Yeah.
People show it or they don't show it, but we've all got the same hang-ups. It's just some people operate at a different, level and have more authority, but fundamentally we're all the same.
Yeah. And that's what I think that we haven't realized when we talk about collaboration, when we talk about security, when we talk about working together. You now talk to us about what you do at IBM.
So I work in IBM Cloud for financial services. And so as the name would suggest, big focus on financial services.
Correct. Yeah. So all that work that you did and all selling software for banks, understanding, how the lend of software works inside of banks, how many owners there are of one specific thing.
Oh, yes.
And navigating the change of a regulatory entity, which was your beginning.
That was my beginning.
And to software, which is just like a full circle and an opportunity to see change.
Absolutely.
But what a time, though. Working at IBM, you're working with global clients, regulatory landscapes, and financial services, depending on who you're targeting, are changing at an insane pace.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, the bad guys don't really care. Use the coolest tools.
Yeah.
And AI, plus some other buzzword bingos that we will get into,
Sure.
are not hard. It's not easy to keep up, but
I
demands of the boards of C-suites of banks.
Totally. And I think that feeling of overwhelm is very, very present.
Yeah.
And it's very infrequent that you will go into a meeting and, sort of check in with people. How are you feeling?
It is, especially in financial services.
Right?
If you walk in, they'll be like,
Yeah.
who are you? Can I get some coffee then? Are you the group therapist? Are we doing some kumbaya? Yeah.
And yet, the thing is that when you find that projects are going nowhere or things aren't tracking orange and then red,
I always those delightful meetings that are like committee. There's 17 people, and we just like look at some Excel sheets and like some PowerPoints. Yeah,
yeah. Or the other meetings where everything's green. Really? Everything's green? Are you sure? And I always try and go there underneath and find out what's really going on, because when people are hostile to an idea, quite often it's because underneath they just don't feel they can take on anything more. Right. And at the moment, I'm seeing that a lot in AI.
Okay.
So there's huge pressure and huge opportunity, right? There is massive opportunity around AI. However, if you're in a security team, it's like, oh, here's another thing to secure. And without necessarily having more resources, without necessarily there's no time, right? Time's not an extensible thing. So the work that I do around operational resilience, and this is why I've been an advocate of not pushing for regulation per se, but there are new regulations like DORA, NIS2, there's equivalent regulation in the UK. Done well, that regulation provides strategic alignment, because for
people out there that don't know these regulations that you're talking about, double down what they are and what they mean for financial services. So there's a lot of bankers and a lot of fintech CEOs that listen to our show.
So it's essentially around resilience. And the core, if we really strip it down, resilience is no matter what happens to you as a financial institution, it could be an operational outage, it could be a cyber attack, something breaks. There's disruption. Can you respond and recover in a way that you're not a risk to yourself, you're not a risk to your customers, and you're not a risk to the financial system? That's
correct, which we've learned.
Right? So
back to your beginnings as well.
It's all these capabilities, the people, the process, the technology. Are you clear enough about how you function as an organization that if something breaks, you can pivot and then pull it back and get back to steady state? And there's a lot of complexity under that. But fundamentally, what it requires is that financial institutions carve out the part of what they do and say, out of all of the things we do, these are the most important things, and we are going to double down on protecting them and building resilience into them and making sure that everybody is super clear about if there is an outage of any kind, we know what to do. And when you get to that level of mastery and you're super clear, when somebody comes and asks you, for example, a banking regulator or a supervisor, and says, tell us about you're able to, and you can tell the story. And there is an emerging need and a role, and I don't know what the official title is going to be, but in essence, it's the chief storyteller, which is, can you tell the story of the bank from the strategy, how you're going to stay relevant and earn money, to your third party or your fourth party provider goes down, there's an outage, payments isn't working, what do you do? And if you can trace it and you can tell it in layman's terms, it means you've got control, because you know how all of the pieces of your puzzle fit together. And even if you take one out, the jigsaw doesn't break. So that's the big challenge in our industry right now, is bringing all of these things together that have kind of come together organically, and we have to keep them together by design.
You said so much that I want to unpack there. So I'll start from sort of the technology side and go back to the human and culture change. For that to happen, it means that I have to recognize I'm not going to own all the pieces.
No.
I am actually like the shift of like, I don't even own the client, which I'm sure you and I have heard many times in financial services rooms.
Yeah.
And many times going like, are we really? Is this really happening? I'm still here. And instead of, but I'm still going to have to be open. This means, things that we know are not equal.
Yeah.
On APIs, on sharing, on perspective of knowing your mastery.
Yeah.
What am I really good at?
Yeah. Totally.
I have heard, I remember my first days into biometrics, and I remember the banks, going into saying something so like this, so fundamental, but so like this compared to the stack that a financial service institution needs to have, and say, no, we're going to be experts. And I'm like, and here now to see the change, but yet it's still a pooling.
Totally. And I think what we're seeing, so if I look at maybe IBM and what we're doing in IBM, there's a learning process for us too. We've always been super customer centric, but we're needing to understand way more about where our technology sits in the business processes of our clients. What's on either side of it?
Okay.
Or what are the other dependencies? And there's a real move towards knowing each other better.
Yeah.
So that when we're designing for resilience, when we're testing, when we're coming up with scenarios, we have to know more about them. They need to know more about us. And a kind of a humility and a curiosity, which comes down to people in rooms and people getting to know each other. And I have always had a conviction about this, is that good work is done when people enjoy spending time with each other. It doesn't mean that there's never disagreement.
Of course.
I actually find that the best project work happens when there can be disagreement, because people know that the relationship is solid enough that it will withstand an argument. So you can say what needs to be said and it's okay. And once you close the door and the meeting's over, people are still
Let go.
They let
Move
go.
forward.
They move forward, right? Because you're not arguing the person, you're arguing the topic. And the people who are kind of stimulated by that, as long as it is done with with good intent, and there is always respect. Those are non-negotiables. But I think a lot of organizations and people kind of do get that wrong in terms of, when we're bringing people in and trying to include people, it doesn't all have to be smooth sailing. There can be friction. There needs to be friction, but there has to be that foundation of respect that people say, I belong here. And my opinion is important and I'm being listened to. It doesn't mean I always get to be right.
And that's what you're doing by saying IBM is going to be open. I'm going to know where I sit on the technology stack inside of a CISO's office, inside of
providing clarity. I think that's one of the greatest gifts in security is when things are clear, you can make decisions. When you know what your risks are, you can make decisions and you can make choices. When everything's a bit fuzzy, and everything is important. Now, for example, that regulation that I mentioned earlier, right? DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It requires that carve out of important business services and critical functions.
Okay.
What turned out in a lot of banks and a lot of insurance companies, it's suddenly everybody wanted to be critical.
I'm so shocked.
Right?
So shocked.
But if everything is critical, nothing's critical.
Yeah.
So that
is almost like the Green Project.
Right? So the biggest challenge to start off with was getting consensus on what are we carving out. And it doesn't mean you don't matter. You just don't matter as much in this context. And I'm hopeful, and it was kind of bolstered by some of the comments yesterday on a panel that I was watching, which was major international bank operating all across the globe, and it was their quantum lead, and he was saying, we actually find this regulation helpful because we were already applying best practice. We were already doing things more or less the way they needed to be done. And when you're set up like that, the regulation is helpful. When you're not set up like that and you haven't been doing things totally, the best way squared, right? That's when you have a lot of legacy cleanup. And that's when it's hard work. The learning curve is really the line.
And that's when it's an opportunity, I think, quite frankly, like regulation can be and has been, like, I'm originally from Brazil, and you look at what happened in financial services there, and you look and hope what's happening in the US and seeing it happening in other countries at different paces. It fosters innovation when the bar, the moat is either high or low for whatever reason, but there's clarity. As you said, there's an opportunity to operate in the market. Tell us some of the more pressing things. You work every day with CISOs, financial services institutions, CEOs and boards, trying to think of this world that, they were taught, let's hold data. Here's my precious. I'm going to build a really high mountain. And I'm going to secure it with really heavy keys. that didn't really work.
Yeah.
And today in financial services, they will need to be everywhere. There's a recognition, whether it's through open banking legislation
Yeah.
or just an understanding that the customer is going to want you to be in different places and provide value.
Yeah.
That changes the game of security in the landscape completely. What
It
you
totally
once
does.
controlled, you no longer do.
Absolutely.
So how do you help financial institutions today as IBM knowing, okay, I'm not going to own the entire stack.
Yeah.
I'm going to be open. I'm going to live in this world of enablement and clarity.
Totally.
How do you help them navigate, what to buy, what to build, what to partner, how to secure things that they actually have no control over?
Yeah.
And to understand where they have the value, where they bring their value.
So,
how do you help them do that when buying security?
Oh, there's so much in there. It's a great question. So we are kind of looking at things through the lens of what's the business problem? And we try and look at, work with our clients and saying, what are you trying to do in terms of, where is this technology going to sit and what is the business driver behind it? And that will require then looking at the characteristics of the workloads. IBM has a long-standing heritage in mainframe, right? Mm-hmm. Keeping things on premise. And the mainframe can tend to get a bad rap in a cloud-native world. The thing about the mainframe, though, is it's solid, right? And some things, for a bunch of reasons, firms prefer to keep it on-prem, even with AI. Some of them are preferring to do that. When we're looking at cloud, one of the things that we're finding is super impactful is looking at what we can do as an ecosystem partner and what capabilities can we make available to clients to ease the burden? So a program that we have is called the Financial Services Validation Program, and it's working with users of our cloud, and they can be ISVs, they can be financial institutions. Okay. And what we try and do, and are successfully doing, is putting in place what we call like parity of controls, right? Security controls. Now, they're technical security controls, process controls, and they're embedded into our cloud infrastructure. Okay. So what it means is we've kind of taken on ourselves the burden, but it made sense for us to do it. Build it once and then expose it and allow our clients to use it multiple times and then expand that into the supply chain. So if we have, for example, IBM Cloud as an infrastructure provider, and then we'll have a financial institution using our cloud for their cloud infrastructure, and they might be deciding that they want to consume an ISV who has an amazing capability for payments, for example. Got it. Right?
Which is something super happening all the time, or maybe they need a new corridor or a new form of payment.
Right. Mm-hmm. So we've got the controls built into our cloud fabric. Okay. Our clients know that, and if they get asked questions about how are you protecting your workloads, we provide the information, the documentation to prove that, and help them with all the attestations and the assurance.
And the storytelling to the regulator.
And then we extend that out into the supply chain so that the ISVs that are part of our FS validation program have also gone through aligning themselves with that cloud control framework, embedding the controls into that SaaS layer. And it just means then that through that whole infrastructure stack, from IaaS, PaaS into SaaS, there's a parity of controls and it stacks up really nicely. So that when they get our financial institution clients get asked, how are you managing your supply chain? It's a
Here
gift.
You go, Mr. Regulator.
Here's how we do it. So does it solve everything?
No, but it's a start. It's a change.
Right? Out of that big elephant of a problem, it shows the art of the possible. It's underpinned by a mindset, which is everybody has a role to play. And it shows up in contracts. It shows up in operational processes. It shows up in where controls are placed. We have, like I said, that parity. So there's a conviction of making shared competence real, making shared responsibility real through behaviors and choices and decisions, and taking an idea on paper, like the cloud control framework exists as an artifact, but it turns into something, right? It turns into something real when it's actually put in place. And when we have partners through cloud, financial institution, smaller technology provider, or sometimes large, like they can be really, really small, innovative startups, or really, really large multinationals who are also moving to the cloud.
We're facing completely different problems
Yeah.
of residency, of different states of like data privacy laws
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've been like, obviously out of the buzzword bingo around AI and some things around solar charging my phone that we've seen in Mobile World Congress, I'm still here asking how are we going to use all this technology, all the security to secure people?
Oh, I know.
To make sure that there's humans on the other side of things and the humans that are on the other side of things are safe.
Absolutely.
And I'm talking from knowing age verification to every other security parameter that in a digital world we don't think of.
Yeah.
And how do we do that with privacy? Where is IBM standing? I know that this is a lot of work that happens. I talk to a lot of financial institutions about this. Talk to me a little bit about what you've been seeing here and seeing out there in the market.
Absolutely. So IBM has always been a really, really strong advocate of responsible technology. We have one of our senior leaders, Christina Montgomery, who's extremely visible and she's inspirational on this topic. So that's just, it's in IBM's DNA, that kind of respect around privacy, and that responsibility, and it permeates, everything. It's pervasive. Even before AI was on everybody's buzzword bingo, we cared about
when
this
data
stuff.
science and when we were doing other things like a couple years ago and it wasn't as sexy sounding, but yes.
So we have always cared about it. And I think, I mentioned kind of like the mentality that underpins technology decisions. We're always looking to exercise what Jim Collins, the management guru, calls the genius of the and, which is things that could be antagonistic. We try and bring them together, which is to say, it's not because we are extremely mindful of privacy and responsible tech that we're saying no to opportunities. It's how can we bring both? How can we have amazing innovation and amazing opportunities and be advocates of responsible tech and privacy and making sure that harm is avoided, making sure that the benefits are real and shared. What I notice often is that when people really start thinking about the human aspects, it's because, unfortunately for them, something's happened to them in their personal life. They might have been a victim of fraud. They might have had somebody vulnerable in their family exploited. And I would love to find, I haven't got the answer to this, I would love to find a way that we can, without having it to be an individual experience, that we are able to take away the abstract and remember that behind everything we're doing, there are people with their phones and there are people trying to do things and there are people trying to live their lives. And we can get too caught up in the abstract. So I've had conversations with people, when somebody working for a medical company said, my perspective totally changed when I realized that, somebody in my family had an adverse effect from a medication, and it wasn't
because it wasn't properly recorded in an electronic medical record. And the power of what identity and identifiers really are.
I said, now I care. Now I care because I felt the hurt. So
you felt the consequence of a label. I think everybody has experienced identity in some form of their life, whether it was the consequence of, hi, you're a mom and what are you doing here? Sounds soft or miss.
Yes.
Or, oh, how cute you do interviews. Right? Whatever shade of somebody's lacking. It's an unfortunate, sad story that some bad people told the world. And I think everybody goes out there trying to find their worth. In this space of having an understanding of people's worth online, I think you said something I want to double down on. Antagonistic of the world's not a zero-sum game. It's not because there's an opportunity and there's privacy that I can do both. Like, how can I actually challenge technology not only to send people to Mars, but actually to say, can I protect the people that are over here taking their phones to the bathroom and maybe shouldn't be accessing something that they are?
Totally.
Or maybe should be protected because financial services is cluing into this. It always had. But they're not really good at sharing when it comes to fraud. So how is IBM? I know IBM has been doing incredible things, talking about security, talking about cryptography. I remember back in the day in like homomorphic encryption days and people trying to explain to me in biometrics what it was. What are you doing now and what kind of products are you helping them bring to market? Because we know a lot of the basis for good identifiers and good data is what we'll need for the right language or learning models. roles?
So what's quite unusual about IBM in terms of how we're structured and the capabilities we have is that we are a technology company and we also have consulting. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this ability to roll out from IBM research and doing amazing things on quantum and AI.
We've had some of your leaders
Right?
here. They've amazed me.
Incredible.
We've had Priya, Zygmunt, like some incredible of your leaders
Yeah.
telling us everything that's happening.
And then it rolls through into cloud and the infrastructure.
Practical, ROI.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we have our technology business. And then all of that kind of comes together. We've got this wrapper of management consulting and business consulting. And when we're looking at these things, I think more and more it's breaking down the silos in our client organizations, because particularly in financial services, you can't crack resilience unless you break down the silos. And that requires that we do even more active partnering internally.
Completely.
Right? So we're learning.
I remember introducing people way back in the day to like, oh, you're IBM, you're in this part of the bank, you're in this part of the bank. Can you like meet each other? And like, can we do the same thing?
So there's a real kind of morphing of capability and these dynamic squads that come together and they disband, but the network and the connection remains.
The solutioning, right?
And coming up with repeatable patterns, going, okay, well, that thing that we did over there, it might not be completely transposable, but what if? And more, they're multidisciplinary teams that are coming together. And that's another buzzword, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, people are finding other people going, I have this problem statement. I kind of have an idea, but I'm missing something. Could you help me? And people come at it because they're interested and motivated. It's one of the things I love about IBM is that we're problem solvers. People love to problem solve. And
I remember my experience personally, like no bleeding blue too much over here, but I had an incredible experience. And I remember putting a meaning for me to the art of the possible.
Yeah.
The art of the possible for me early back before biometrics were on phones. I remember people looked at me like, are you telling a Minority Report story? Like, is this going to be real? And then we worked with IBM to bring a product to life through an MSA. Yeah. And that allowed a financial service company to buy from a startup back in the day.
Yeah.
So how is IBM doing that in a world of AI, in a world of open source? How are you helping banks effectively, regulated entities deal with all of this?
Totally. And so the program that I mentioned earlier, right, that FS validation is we bring together a community. So one of the things that I'm actively working on right now is the next event that we're doing for the Financial Services Cloud Council, which is going to be in June in London, and we do another one in New York.
Which I'm totally inviting myself for. Okay.
And the ethos behind that is bringing together people who may not meet each other easily, but they need to talk. Right? So we will bring regulators and policymakers and banks and small ISVs and big ISVs, and people who will be coming from public authorities. They might be coming all over the world to talk about the issues in a very pragmatic way. So there aren't very many forums where you will be able to have a supervisor talking to a round table of bankers where it's not supervisory and it's not super
formal. It's not,
right?
Yeah, it's not an audience with a regulator. It's a conversation about an issue. And it's a problem solving.
It's a problem solving one. Yeah. And that's the thing is, okay, here's what we're facing as a bank.
Yeah.
And then the supervisor will say, oh, okay, well, our policy is aimed to do this. And they go, we're not arguing with the policy. Again, resilience. I don't
it might be, but here's the why.
Well, often, like, I haven't heard anyone, genuinely, I have never heard anybody argue against the principle of more resilience in financial services. It would be very disingenuous to do that. Nobody argues with the principle and the target outcome. They have an issue sometimes with how hard it feels. And
how hard it is to execute in a world of like most banks
it's not easy.
Swim in software.
Right. Not
swim
easy.
In department silos.
Yeah.
And just a lack of understanding when you're trying to, I don't know, generate returns, run the bank budget, change the bank budget.
Yeah.
Right. We've been through
this, right? So the conversation is one of, oh, we didn't realize. Oh, okay. We hadn't quite grasp that nuance. And it just breeds more understanding so that when people go back to their respective organizations, they have a deeper perspective of what's going on the other side. And it's not antagonistic. It's people trying, like, I truly believe, apart from some very, very marginal cases, people don't show up in work to have a terrible day. Like, they don't show
One
up
would
in work
hope.
and they don't show up, to make other people's days hell. Now, if you're undergoing a bank exam, it might feel that way, but, that's...
Might feel like pulling nails, yeah.
Right? But we're facilitating conversations and facilitating better understanding around these big topics. Like,
give me some of the big topics that they're going after right now.
so-
Give me the hot ones that you're going to be covering in some of this
AI. All right,
AI.
AI, definitely. AI. How to securely consume AI, Gen AI for business benefit.
And banks are terrified. I work in fraud all the time, and they're just terrified between the reality of what's happening out there beyond the deep fakes have gone
crazy. Yeah. So all flavors of AI.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm trying to beat the drum on a bit is around quantum readiness. But people are kind of going, oh, can we not call that tomorrow's problem? Well, you can, but don't call it tomorrow's problem. Embed it in what you're already doing, especially when you're working on
that's hard, right? Like, we just went over, they're barely over the buzzword bingo of the last week, which is like today's AI.
Kind of. But truly, I think there's a way of looking at quantum readiness and saying, in the here and now, encryption, you're already using it, right?
Of course.
The regulation is doubling down on you have to look at your confidentiality, integrity, authenticity, availability, right? So it's already everywhere. And managing the here and now, just be smart about it and inventory it, Do some discovery.
What could that mean? What could that mean of asking suppliers, supply chain? Like, what does it mean to be, what are some of the questions that leaders out there can be asking on either your AI or your quantum readiness? What are some of these indicators? You kind of said it in terms of what is happening in encryption, what is happening in confidentiality, you kind of give us some hints there. But
so the cloud kind of underpins all of this, right? It's sort of going at the speed of cloud, benefiting from...
And we have, how are you doing for time? We're a little over. It's 10, 15, 10, 18.
Yeah, it's okay. I have another
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then we drop you off.
So underneath all of this is a move to cloud, right? A cloud is becoming more and more pervasive, but more intentional. So a lot of the move to cloud previously would have been driven by a desire to save cost. There's a way now of benefiting from cloud economics, but it has to be managed. So we're seeing a move to more FinOps. And all of that is being accentuated because of AI and because of considerations around post-quantum. If you're not doing cloud properly to start with, it's going to be really, really hard to do it properly with AI. So
we need a whole other episode when you're talking about cloud properly, but we'll get to it before June.
So all of that to say is that there's massive opportunity. And I'm just where the opportunity presents itself to have conversations with people like this, like at MWC, is to say, okay, no matter where you are, don't beat yourselves up about things that mightn't have been done perfectly. There's still a way to actually leverage the opportunity that you're being pressured to embrace for AI. Don't feel like the bottom is falling out of your world because quantum is here and you've lost control of everything. No, there are ways to engage and learn and put in place no matter what your starting point is. Again, that stoic mindset, right? Start with what you have and make the best of it. And the community that we're building, I think, in IBM Cloud is super powerful because it reassures people that everybody's going through the same thing. People are really generous in sharing their learnings. They're very, they don't just tell the sugar-coated version. They tell about the struggle. And in a lot of ways, that's what builds trust. Because, right,
that's what built a common place.
You
see people.
And people kind of going, okay, well, we did this. We wouldn't do it that way again if it was to be done over, but learn from it, right? Learn
and totally, that's super powerful when we talk about forums, when you're saying you're bringing the regulator together, you're bringing academia, you're bringing other clients that other would otherwise meet. And maybe if they're not competing and you see a world where possibility exists. And when we're talking about
Even
resilience, as
even
you
when they're
said,
competing, right?
yeah.
The people we bring into the room, they are competitors,
Mhm.
but in that space, they are partners and collaborators, and they
Building resilience.
yeah.
Mhm.
And sharing learning about moving to cloud, and they want to learn from each other. So they go back out into the world and they compete. But there are spaces where it is more important to be partners. And I'm thinking, for example, around fraud, crime prevention, these types of topics. No single organization can crack them.
No.
So
And I think they know that.
they know that.
And are they sharing? Do you see a world where we share fraud data and cloud?
I see a world where some really smart people
Mm.
are coming together and creating circles of trust. And
Okay.
there is a groundswell. Now, how far it will go, how formal it will become, I don't know. But these people, I've had the pleasure of being in rooms with some of them, and it's just energizing.
Okay.
So what they're trying to figure out is a way of how can we share without causing any collateral damage? How can we share without exposing ourselves to more risk and more liability? How can
is there cryptography? Is there hashing? Is there tokenization? Is there identity?
Sure there will. I'm sure there will be. Privacy enhancing technologies. Yes, all of that good stuff. But it starts with trying to find a shared goal.
Yeah.
And once you have that shared goal and that shared conviction of what we're aiming for, you can find technical solutions right there. I would almost say the technology is secondary to the intention. We can figure out the technology, and we will. Like, we already have such a wealth of technology, but it's challenging people's assumptions about, is this worth doing? Can we do it? Should we do it? Yeah. Let's go challenge those assumptions.
And finding the good fights. There's very few fights worth picking in life. Fraud has to be
one of them. I read that this morning, a great quote, and I'm going to take it with me throughout today, which is, don't major on minor things.
Aha. And I think that's a wonderful thing to leave us with. Don't major in minor things. You've been a breath of fresh air in this car.
Awesome.
And a story of resilience from a personal energy one to one that you've built a career and help these leaders navigate.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us an insight into how IBM is helping financial institutions and, what's the future of financial institutions going to look like if they don't learn how to navigate uncertainty and trust.
Yeah. It's having a conviction about where we are in the world and where we fit, and leading from a place of trust as opposed to a place of fear. That changes everything.
And we all will see you in the cloud. And if nothing else, in June, we'll leave the show notes to you to find out more about Annie and more about the event.
Yes.
And what IBM Cloud is doing for financial services. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me.
It was fab. Thank you so much for having me.